This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Doug Smith. It is time for our Monday through Thursday, 1 o'clock podcast. We're glad to be here. Glad you're here with us. Let's jump right in. Okay. This is where you will hear the science. And I want to jump right into the science today. Okay. Because that's what we do here on this podcast. We go over the science. We talk about science. What is the science behind the opioids? What is the science that says that our people are opioid drug addicts? What is the science that says that our people are not drug addicts? What is the science that says that instead our people have been genetically damaged by the opioids? And what is the science that says because of that genetic damage, what is known as a genotoxicity, our people suffer from a very specific type of disease called a signature disease from genetic poisoning, genotoxicity, a signature disease from genotoxicity. That means that the genotoxicity, the poisoning to the DNA, is the only thing known that can cause the specific disease that our people endure. And that's why it's called a signature disease. But what we want to jump into today is into this thing called the dopamine theory of addiction, or the brain disease model of addiction. This is the justification that is used to call our people a drug addict. If someone has called you an opioid addict, or that you have opioid addiction, or that you have opioid use disorder, which is another phrase for opioid addiction, this is the science that they're using to make that statement. You can't just make a diagnosis without science behind it. That's just not the way medicine works. Okay, if you're going to make a diagnosis, you must have science behind it. That diagnosis must have legs. It must be able to stand up, and you've got to be able to prove that diagnosis. And this is where the diagnosis of opioid addiction or opioid use disorder, this is where it falls down. There's no science behind it. Let me say that again. There is no science behind the diagnosis of opioid addiction. Let me say it one more time. There is no science behind the diagnosis of opioid addiction. Now, what they're going to claim is what you're looking at on the screen right here. Look at the top left-hand corner. Okay, that's from the very prestigious New England Journal of Medicine. I have canceled my subscription. I hope others do also. The very prestigious New England Journal of Medicine. It is the top premier publication for medical research, and this is from January of 2016, and it's an article by Dr. Nora Volkow, a person who I consider to be one of the main architects of the opioid crisis. In my opinion, this woman has blood on her hands. Dr. Nora Volkow, executive director at NIDA, NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse. She's been the executive director since 2003. So for 22 years, she has been in the position overseeing what could have been a very important organization, NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse. But instead, under the leadership, if you want to call it that, the so-called leadership of Dr. Nora Volkow, it's become just I'm not even going to say it's a worthless institute, because it actually did. If it was worthless, nobody would have gotten hurt. This institution, with what's happened with the opioids, has become uh, deadly. She has overseen a deadly organization, and I will tell you why. Uh, this is the group that are pushing, again, the dopamine theory of addiction, or the brain disease model of addiction. And the theory is very simple. Okay, it's a very simple theory. Let's go over the theory. Okay, the theory is that anything that's addictive, drugs, gambling, chocolate, sex, whatever it is, anything that's addictive, they all share a common pathway in the brain. All addictions, according to this theory, share a common pathway in the brain, and that this common pathway is in the reward centers of the brain. And that what happens is, when you're exposed to the addictive substance, when you're exposed to whatever it is, cocaine, alcohol, gambling, sex, whatever it is, okay, you get a surge of dopamine. Okay, you take a bite of chocolate, you get a surge of dopamine. You take a hit of amphetamines, you get a surge of dopamine in the reward centers of the brain. And that this surge in dopamine is so incredibly wonderful, so overpowering, that it basically hijacks the brain, recircuits the brain, and now all the brain wants to do is get that little surge of dopamine again. So the brain's now surge, it's now the brain is using itself and its powers to seek out whatever it was, the hit of chocolate, the gambling at the, cards at the table, the hit of cocaine, the alcohol, whatever it was. Okay, that's the dopamine theory of addiction. The reason it's called the dopamine theory of addiction is because, according to the theory at least, there's a common pathway of everything that's addictive, and that's a surge in dopamine. Dopamine is what's called a neurotransmitter. A surge in this chemical dopamine in the brain, specifically in the reward centers. Okay, that's the dopamine theory of addiction, otherwise known as the brain disease model of addiction. And there on the screen in front of you are some of the people that are pushing this. Dr. Nora Volkow at the National Institute of Drug Abuse, Dr. Ingrid Olsen there at SAMHSA. These are government institutions. These are government organizations. These people have an enormous amount of power, money, staff. They're able to do a lot of damage, and they did a lot of damage. Look at the opioid crisis. You're looking at the people. You send them a thank you card. They're the ones that did this. Okay, we're talking about the people that caused the opioid crisis. Okay, yes, the FDA missed the genetic damage from the opioids, but one of the reasons that the FDA missed it is because the FDA is full of psychiatrists also. Okay, everybody in front of you, those two women are both psychiatrists. The person at the FDA that's responsible for what happened is a psychiatrist. That's the one thing that's in common is it is a psychiatrist that brought this to us. Okay, the opioid crisis was courtesy of the psychiatrist. Let me say that again. The opioid crisis was courtesy of the psychiatrist. And it's the psychiatrist at SAMHSA, the psychiatrist at NIDA, the psychiatrist at the FDA. Many of you were diagnosed by a psychiatrist. It's the psychiatrist that brought us the opioid crisis, and they did it by promoting this dopamine theory of addiction. Now, as we're going to see, okay, at least when it comes to the opioids, there is no surge in dopamine in the brain. And there have been a couple of very well done studies using what's called a PET scan, positron emission tomography. That's a state of the art. In fact, Dr. Nora Volkow considers herself an expert on positron emission tomography. So she knows very well that the scientific evidence is against the opioids and this dopamine theory of addiction. Now, dopamine theory of addiction may be true for gambling, may be true for cocaine, may be true for alcohol. We don't know. Okay, it's not our issue. We don't know anything about that. And we're not going to know anything about that. Okay, but what we do know, and what we're going to talk about this week, is that there have been two very well done scientific studies that when opioids were administered to humans, there was no surge in brain dopamine. There was no surge in brain dopamine. Now, what does that mean to you? It means that there is no scientific evidence behind the diagnosis of opioid addiction. If somebody labeled you with opioid addiction or somebody labeled you as having opioid use disorder, it's very important that you understand there is no science behind that diagnosis. And as we've come to find out, the diagnosis is wrong. As we've come to find out, what actually happened was the genetic damage done to everybody, that little bit of genetic damage with every single dose of the opioid, take an opioid, a little bit of damage, take an opioid, a little bit of damage, take an opioid, a little bit of genetic damage, till you reach some threshold. Then when you try to stop taking the opioids, you get a sickness unlike anything you've ever had in your life. What we call the signature disease. That signature disease, that sickness, you cannot ignore it. You will go out and buy something. And for the people who don't understand why you went out and bought fentanyl or you went out and bought heroin, let them experience the signature disease and let's see how long they last. That's how one of you guys put it to me. You get sick and you see how long you last. I thought that was a pretty effective way to communicate that. All right, everybody, we're a couple minutes over today. My apologies. It's going to be an exciting week to go over some of the science. Please come back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Those of you who can, please do the DNA test. We need as many people as possible to do the DNA test. Please do the DNA test. Okay, we need as many as possible. We are beginning this week an outreach to the Senate. I will talk about that more, but let me say that again. We are beginning this week an outreach to the Senate. I need as many of you as possible. We need as many of you as possible to do the DNA test. My name is Dr. Doug Smith. Please put this podcast on your social media and everybody else's social media, and we will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thank you, and thank you, Alex.